It's such a lovely good morning. Happy just to see you today. A super special good morning. Nothing's gonna get in our way. And there's an open window to my heart, sending all this love right through and out to you. 'Cause it's a great day. Let's make some music this morning, something that we'll all want to sing. A new song just for this morning. Happiness is now happening. And there's a sweet melodic harmony shining through my soul and up and out to you. 'Cause it's a great day. We can do anything we want to do. Open our minds and make it so. Knowing the truth of possibility. We like the way we choose to go. What do you think? What do you say? Isn't it great? This is the day. Isn't it true? What we can do when a positive thought meets a loving feeling, intention starts to grow. A positive thought meets a loving feeling, intention starts to flow. It's such a lovely good morning, happy just to see you today. A super Sunday, good morning, nothing's gonna get in our way. And there's an open window through my heart, sending all this love right through and out to you. 'Cause it's a great, yes, it's a great, it's simply a great day.
You may not know this, but if you've been around here for a while, you might know this, is that on Thursday, we will be having a universal high holy day. Universal, as in Northern Hemisphere universal. And that is the winter solstice, celebrated for thousands and thousands of years across continents. It has been a very special day in the lives of people for as long as we have recorded history. Wise men and women needed to know that day. I'm not sure why they needed to know that, but if I was looking at what the soul wanted to know, perhaps the soul wanted to know that when it is darkest, there will be a dawn, and to remember that, and that one of the mystics, what some of the mystics have said is that during this time of transition, so every morning when the night transitions into day, and in the winter when the shortest day transitions into the beginning of longer days, supposedly the veil between the seen and the unseen is the thinnest. It's when you can most easily receive downloads that are beneficial, light-filled for you. And so people thought of that. There was also the people who weren't thinking of that, didn't care about the inside, and what they really wanted to know is, okay, we're halfway there, we've gone through half our food, we're gonna make it. Yay. Or we're halfway there, we've gone through more than half our food, what are we gonna do now? And planning ahead. Because for so many centuries, existence depended upon how they got through the winter and how we get through the winter. How many of you know that how you get through the winter really seems like life and death? It may not be life and death, but it seems that way. So, you know, all these stories out there, there are stories. How many of you have ever felt like it's so dark you wonder if you'll exist? Right? It's so dark, will I get through this? It's so dark, I'm not sure I can make it. And then a glimmer of light, and you take a deep breath, and it's going to be okay. That's what this celebration's about, really, this whole winter solstice thing, if we really look at what the soul story is. It is a longing for light, externally and internally. But before I get to that, I just want to go off on a tangent. Is it okay if I go off on a tangent? Hopefully it'll be fairly enlightening or somewhat new. But I get this whole, I'm just like, a war on Christmas? Really? Don't call it a holiday tree, call it a Christmas tree? No, let's call it a holiday tree. You know where the tree came from? The Celts. They had trees. Oh, and they weren't fir trees. You know, when they became fir trees when they wanted to bring them inside. And the real tree, the real holy tree, was an oak. So in Northern Europe, every way except to the Alps, they stopped at the Alps. In Northern Europe, villages were created around a great oak tree. Where to put a village? Around an oak tree. 2 reasons. First of all, it represented to them the tree of life. The roots went deep into the unknown, and then it reached up to the sky, which is a great metaphor for life itself. And so many religions have a tree of life. In Egypt, there were ancient carvings on the walls of a tree of life. There's a tree of life in Northern Europe. There's a tree of life in Judaism. There's trees of life everywhere. But you think about it, it's like something goes deep into the unknown, then there's the reaching up towards heaven, which is sort of what we do, don't we? And if we don't go deep, we can't go high. If we're not really willing to plant our roots in the ground of the invisible and get firm and secure, there's no reaching up. And the first wind that comes along, topple over. Great metaphor. So that's one of the reasons why they picked an oak tree. And this is the other reason. This is the new stuff. They built their villages around an oak tree because there's something about the oak tree that when lightning hits, it will hit an oak first. So if they didn't want their houses hit by lightning, they put an oak tree in the middle of the village. Who knew? And then when the oak tree, it wouldn't burn. For something about it, it would absorb the lightning, and it might burn off a branch, but not the whole tree. And then they took that branch and they called it holy fire, and they'd share it with everybody. So when the priests and the missionaries and others crossed the Alps and got into the area in Northern Europe where the Celts lived, they found that on the day before the solstice, the Celts would take some of their food, sort of as an offering, dried apples and dried pears and nuts, and they would string them with yarn and hang their food all over the tree. What's that sound like? The day before the solstice. 'Twas the night before solstice, and all through the village. Anyway. So they would hang these things on the tree, and that became part of the tradition because I love what our Christian ancestors were like. They said, oh, that's great. We'll include that. And the solstice was always about rebirth. It was the rebirth of the earth, the rebirth of light on the earth. And they said, oh, Christmas is all about birth. And they sort of blended the two together. In fact, in the early church, Christmas was not celebrated at all until the 500s. It was like no big deal. This is not something that they even put their attention on until they went to a place that would not give up the celebration of the winter solstice. So it just sort of got incorporated. So when people say that this is a Christian tradition, most likely not. If you do the research, most likely not. I'm not against Christianity. I'm not against Christmas. I love it. I make it my own. But what I know is to make it my own, I also make it a bigger known. There's so much more going on. So much more went into it than a simple story. So I just want to include that because I want to talk about the solstice even more, because if you look at it, it is about, it's about the story of our own soul. And what I was talking about that. It's like the darkness, and you just want light, and you don't know if you're going to make it through. That was 2016 for me. This talk was born last year at this time, because I finally got the light, and things changed in 2017. And inspiration came, and stuff started showing up. It was totally different, but I'm not sure I would have had the inspirations that I had in 2017 if I hadn't been willing to be in the dark of 2016. Which means you don't medicate, you don't do spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass is, it's all good. It's all good. How is it? I am fine. God's good. God's good all the time, even when you're in the stuff. My stuff doesn't change God, but I still had stuff. And to know that helped me have breakthroughs. So I want to talk about that today. But first of all, I want to start with a premise. Darkness is not the absence. Darkness is not a thing. Darkness is not a thing. It's not a power. It's the absence of light. So when you introduce light, to the degree there is power in the light, to that degree it dissipates darkness. Darkness is not powerful enough to squelch light. If you go into a cave with no light and you bring a candle in or a flashlight, even if it's a tiny candle or a tiny flashlight, the dark doesn't take away the candle or the flashlight. The candle doesn't go, I can't stand it, and die. It just burns. The light will shed all of its power in this dark, and to the degree that the light is large or small, it will dissipate the dark in that area. The dark has no power to take away light. Also, there is no power in cold. Cold is the absence of heat. Heat can be measured. Heat can go up and up and up and up. There's heat at the center of our sun, and there's bigger suns with more heat. There's no end to heat. There's no end to the capability of heat. There's no end to what heat can do, and there is an end to cold. Because you take away enough heat and you get absolute zero, and it doesn't get colder than that. And absolute zero is only a measurement of the absence of heat. So what's a constant? Energy and heat. What's a constant? Light. Everything else, darkness and cold, is just a reflection of its absence, a result of its absence. It's the result of absence. Suffering has no power. Suffering is the absence of grace. And grace is a constant. And you can have more of it and more of it and more of it and more of it and more of it. And the more you have, the less you'll have suffering. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have pain. Pain happens. Mentally, physically, and emotionally, pain happens. Suffering is the continuation of that pain, are almost holding on to that pain. It's like having a rock in your shoe and continuing to walk with the rock in your shoe and complaining about the rock in your shoe and suffering because of the rock in your shoe instead of either getting rid of the rock or loving the rock. So suffering is a choice. Now, we don't know it's a choice. We think we're doing the right thing. I'm going to say this out loud because there's people here that think this. I was surprised at what was going on for service. There are people here who think they must suffer to somehow atone for something in their past. I don't know who you are, but I know you think it. So I'm going to give you some advice. Stop it. Because grace says, The rock can be gone at any time. Grace says you're free. Grace says that you deserve to be lifted out of this continual pain pattern. That's grace. Grace is the free givingness of God, which is absolutely undeserving. See, as long as you put in deserving in there, that's like putting a rheostat on stuff. Well, I only deserve this much. I was good, so now I deserve more. I wasn't good. I deserve less. They're really bad. They don't deserve anything. But you know who's affected by that rheostat when you judge others they don't deserve? It's your rheostat. Here's a good act of grace. Everybody in Washington, D.C. deserves all the good they can handle. And guess who gets it? Grace is undeserved. It's the free givingness of God. It is that, and I'm going to just speak of this because someone brought it up first service. They said, what about karma? Karma was a law until grace was brought to earth. What Jesus brought was the law of love, which is grace. And love doesn't care what you did. Love is willing to love you as soon as you turn to it. That's grace. It's like having a child, and some of you haven't had children, because we live in one of the most childless cities in the United States. So let's use another one. Who's had a puppy? Or a kitten? How many of them have done things on the floor? It wasn't fun. You had to clean it up, but you loved them anyway, right? That's God and us. We shit all over ourselves, and it still loves us. And grace will clean it up, and you'll be pure and move right along, okay? And it doesn't say, oh, remember last year when you were a puppy? That's grace. Everybody understand grace now? Great. That's what this whole winter solstice Christmas season's about. It's undeserved love, givingness, and there's 3 ways to open up to grace. The first way to open up to grace is to actually be grace. To be the givingness of God in form. To be the place where good shows up. When we always have something to give, we always have a way for good to show up. It doesn't necessarily have to be in great gifts. I saw someone bringing in all these toys. God bless them. And some of you don't have the means to buy toys. Sometimes we have means, sometimes we don't. But we always have something to give. Because we are made in the image and likeness of that which gives. So sometimes it'll be just a smile or encouragement or support or just your story. If we were a 12-step program, and we should be a 12-step program. Hi, I'm Kathianne, and I forgot I'm divine. That is, and day by day I remember. And part of what happens with the 12-step program is that you just share your story. You don't try to convert anybody. You just say, guess what? I'm better. Some wonderful gentleman first service said, it was so important to him. He said, in 37 days, I will be clean and sober for 5 years. Now, when you've got it down to 37 days, I will be clean and sober for 5 years. It's actually a very important thing to that person. And you know what? Him saying it probably will help somebody who might be either in their first day, their second day, or no days. I don't know. I'm not sure this works. See, even sharing the story is the self-givingness of God through you. Let's just use Wendy. Why not? I watched Wendy have an area of interest, which was seniors. And I saw you wonder and think about, how can I go in that direction when this is where I work and this is where I get my livelihood? And you know what? You entertain both of them. And now, in her work and her livelihood, she gets to work with seniors. People need to know that because too many people believe I have to have this or this. And God says, Oh, I could do both. It's possible to do both. How many of you do either or, therefore you do nothing? How many of you have decided that I can have this or I can have that, and since I can't have them both, I'll just take nothing? How many have done it? God says, how about both? And so to share that story over and over with, will light a fire under somebody who needs to know that they've dummied down their dream because they didn't believe that God was enough. And you could be just the light in their darkest time when they think, I can't have it. We become the self-givingness of God when we just have, when we show up, we're present, and we ascertain what needs to be done, and we give what we can. See, giving is sometimes dummied down to what's the material thing I have, when what the spiritual goods you have is amazing. There's no end to the spiritual gifts that you have to give. Now, you don't know all of them, and you won't know all of them. It's like one of those closets you open up and you go, I had a girlfriend who had one of those closets. She lived in a tiny place, and everything was in this closet. I opened it up once. I was horrified. I had no idea that someone could get so much into a closet. But you know what? If she started giving out of that closet, there'd be a lot more in there. As you start giving what you have, you'll find a lot more in there. So we allow ourselves to know grace by being givingness. Another way to open up to grace is to make it a habit to pray for others. And as you do, you become, you allow yourself to not only imagine them being blessed, but see them on the other side. See them well. There are many people that I know, and myself, and I will include myself in those people I know, who I don't tell people when I am in trouble because I will see people see me in trouble. They are not trained to see me beyond trouble. I don't want that consciousness on me. I want people to agree with my end result, not my present condition. And that's why we train prayer practitioners. They are trained to know that grace is operating in the life of the person that they're praying for, but then they see them at the other end of the condition. Not sympathizing with the condition, because that will keep you it can keep you in the condition. So, yes, pray for people, see them at the other end, but here's the benefit of praying for another person. And this comes from Artemis, our mystical scientist. She's a scientist by trade and a mystic by choice. And she was part of a class that a lot of us attended and were participating in called the Mystical Living 2017. It was my experiment with living by faith and not by sight. By only doing the things that would help me connect more and more and more to my God, and no longer praying for effects. So we did that for a year. And we allowed ourselves to connect with God for 6 months, and then the next 6 months, they took on big stuff. They took on groups of people, not praying that anything happened to them, but praying that all they could see in these people, whether it was a group of individuals they knew or a country, all they would know was God. And it's amazing that in that short time that we had together, the last 3 months out of them starting to pray, things started to happen in those areas that we were praying for. And I think we got to keep it up. So we're going to go to the next one. The next one is make a habit of praying for other people. That's our second way. So here's an article from Artemis, because she was asked, in fact, actually challenged, to use the scientific method of inquiry to prove that as we pray for others, we get the immediate benefit for ourselves. And Artemis is up to it. Isn't she, Nancy? Yes, Artemis can do this. So this is her thesis. To understand the pay I receive when I pray for others. I look at the following common physical phenomena with the lenses of thermodynamics and kinetics. Example number 1. When we place two bodies at different temperatures in touch, the warmer body will raise the temperature of the cooler body, i.e., heat flows from a higher temperature or body to a lower temperature or body. Now, the bigger the warmer body is, the faster will the temperature of the cooler body rise. If the warm temperature is infinite, if the body is infinite in size, the cooler body's temperature will rise immediately in real time. This is from a scientist. When we have two vessels containing different concentrations of salt and we connect them, salt will flow from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. The greater the differences in concentration, the faster the flow. Again, infinite body of salt, it would equalize instantly in the lower body of salt, in the lower concentration. Third example. Light bodies give heat and energy to darker bodies. That is why a car under a carport does not freeze overnight, even though the temperature of the air underneath the carport is the same as the outside of the carport. I always wondered why that was true. Why is it that people that can just put a thing over their car don't have frost on it in the next morning? Now we know. Thermodynamics. See, I just thought it was weird. The roof of the carport insulates the car from losing heat to the dark sky. Evil dark sky. Similarly, for beaches in warm climates, walking paths are painted white as the white gives off heat while the darker sand absorbs heat. Thus, one can walk on the white paths while the dark sand is too hot to step on. Similarly, we wear dark clothes in the winter and lighter ones in the summer. No, we wear dark clothes because it makes us look thinner. But look, even a scientist can be wrong. So, when I think of our scientific prayer, when we pray for someone else, in the first two steps of this prayer, we are thinking of God and the qualities of God, and that the qualities of God are in ourselves and the other person, and we are connecting ourselves to these God qualities. Thus, the God quality is flowing through our being. It's at a higher level of concentration, and because we're connecting to it, it is giving to us instantaneously to the degree that we are open to it. So whenever I pray for another person, I am receiving instantly and in significant amounts the quality of God that I am naming for another person. It could be abundance, good health, strength, joy, love, whatever God quality that may be. Does that make sense? We can thank Artemis for that scientific explanation about why one of the best ways to open up to grace is to pray for other people. Now, the last way is to pray for yourself. And that's to turn up the rheostat, because we still have a thought process that says, I can only have this much. I've taken too much. The example I used, and I'll use it again, because it still may not have gotten through, is that Jerry Hudson has allowed herself to have two great trips, one to Peru and one to Egypt. And there's a part of her that's thinking, yes, but I've got this ministerial school stuff to happen. And even though when she decided to go, the money came in, there could be the thought that, well, I've already had these two nice trips. I mean, that's, I should be just grateful for what I have. There's a difference between this. I should be grateful for what I have can be turning down the rheostat. Instead of, well, if it happened once, it might happen again. Turning up the rheostat. We can sometimes say, because this is so good, I should just be happy with what I have. But God's idea of good for us is always greater than our idea of good. So we begin the process of opening up to grace by praying that you are open to receiving unlimited blessings. Now, take that in. Take a deep breath. Say it with me. Unlimited blessings. So let's just say this together. I'll say it first. I am open to unlimited blessings. I am open to unlimited blessings. And the reason that we can do this is that if it's infinite, if God is infinite, if the qualities are infinite, our taking some of it, since we're finite, we can't empty out the infinite. So we're going to get as big as we want to. Think of yourself as a little tick. Get really big. I know. I understand you thought that was gross, but I did get your attention. And you will remember it more than if I just said, oh, just be open to the infinite. The tick is open to its good. And it gets really big. The reason that I put this down there is I sometimes have to do this. I sometimes want to dummy down my heart and what my heart wants. And the way that I dummy it down is just so spiritual. The way I say it is, but I've got such a good life. This is so good. And there's always the spark of light within me saying, yes, but the days will get longer and the good could get more. What are you going to do, Kathianne? Are you going to accept? Or are you going to settle? Before we pray, I'm going to open this up to questions because we've gotten really great opportunities for clarity by the questions people have asked. First service was amazing. So any questions about this? So that when you leave here, you're willing to open up to greater good. You're willing to be the place where good shows up. You're willing to give grace to others. You're willing to accept grace, kind of know what grace is. And the way to know that you might have a question is, when I say all those things, are there any niggles? You know, the stomach goes, I don't know. Any questions? I don't see. Okay, you have to stand up. Okay, and come on over here. Oh, dear. Yeah, we don't tell you to come forward first. But you may change our lives. Here, my dear.
So when you were speaking, I thought of this adage that I have repeated to myself many times. And it goes, wealthy is the man who is content with what he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that makes me wonder if I really practiced contentment, would I need any more?
You wouldn't need it, but you might want it. So let me give you an illustration.
Can I sit down?
Well, can I sit down? Come here, honey. So how many of you can resonate with her question? See how many people you touched by that? Because they have similar stuff, but they would have just gone home and let it ruminate and maybe run their life. So you actually are giving us all a chance for freedom, okay? Being content, being okay with what you have, is like driving a stick shift car. Some of you have not driven stick shift cars, you young'uns, but how many of you have driven stick shift cars? Thank you. So you hold the consciousness so that we can share it with those who haven't. So hold this for a second while I drive a stick shift. All right. To drive a stick shift, to go from one gear to the next, you have to put in the clutch. But you'd probably do it more like that. I mean, you know, it's got to be smooth. How many of you, and the smooth, you have to let up on the gas, in with the clutch. And then it's just this dance, you know. Yeah, so it's a dance. When you have the clutch in, you can then move it to a higher gear. Being content is having the clutch in. You can go for less or you can go for more. Does that make sense? You can actually up the, what is some guy with? Thank you. I was going to ask for some guy to help me, but the RPMs of the engine. Oh, lady, I bet you had a car. Anyway, so you can up the RPMs of the engine, which allows you to go at a faster rate. You're still going in the same direction, but you've got more power. So it's essential to be content. If you're not content, you're trying to fix. And when you get into fixing, it actually perpetuates the problem. If you're not content with your situation, you are perpetuating the problem, the situation. If you are not content with your job, you are perpetuating that kind of job, and even if you flee that job, you'll find that job. If you are not content with your relationships, even though you get rid of people, they'll be in the next town. So contentment is wonderful. But if you really listen to your heart, sometimes the contentment says, and I would like this also. If I've got 3 friends, I can have 6 friends. If I have health, I could have vital health. Does that make sense? I think sometimes that idea of wealth is the person who's happy with what they've got. I'm paraphrasing. Yes, it's true, but sometimes it's also a way to make those people who don't have just be happy with not having. Now, if that's the truth, that's a lie. Because God doesn't say that. God says, that here's all this abundance. I've come that you might have a life and have it more abundantly. So there's a different way of looking at it. So let me just give you an illustration. Tim and I love our ranchette. He's put a lot of energy into it. It's looking good. The house could be remodeled, but I'm telling you, the barn is exceptional. Horse people come to our ranchette and they go, nice horse property. The horses don't know it's nice, but we're going to take them for a tour and let them see other places. Anyway, put them all in the trailer and say, this is where you could live. But here's the deal. I sometimes wish that that I had a place that was warm, that we could get away to in the winter. Now, I'm content with where we are, but sometimes about January and February, I'd like warmer weather. So for me to have an intention to have someplace to go in the winter doesn't make me discontent with what I have. It's just an expansion of my living situation. Does that make sense? But I could dummy it down and say, look, you've got a nice spot. Stop your griping. Be happy with what you've got. Do you see the difference? So when we say that contentment, the wealth is contentment, if I'm content, I'm actually wealthy, which means I can also accept more. Because wealth means well-being. And if well-being means for me that in the winter I can go get warm and not have it be a strain, then that's also God's will. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. And how many of you were all served by her being so willing to ask that question? See? See? And wealth is a bugaboo. Let's just say what it is. There's nobody ever stands up and says, I just think I have too much health. I think I should be sick more. Nobody says, I think I have too much love. I'm going to eliminate some friendships. We do it, though, we do judge ourselves when it has anything to do with wealth, prosperity, having abundance. That is a sin, not the money or the abundance or the wealth, but the thoughts we have about it, because sin means a mistake. And it's sinful to somehow think that this category of life, which is a small category of life, is somehow outside the realm of spirituality. There's God and then there's that. I mean, you know, we're all advanced. We finally gave up our, well, I'm not sure if you did, but I was going to say we gave up our sex hang-ups. Sex hang-ups. And what? Ears? Where? But boy, we can still have our wealth hang-ups. And that's a hang-up. So, because we deserve to have a sense of well-being. It doesn't mean have more. It doesn't mean hoard. It doesn't mean keep from. It just means well-being. Let's pray. So let's just move into a consciousness of grace. Grace is the free givingness of the universe. The universe gives to its creation, and we are that creation. We are the place where God shows up to be its great and beautiful and giving self. And in the process of giving, we receive. In the process of receiving, we can give. It is a beautiful, healthy, and wonderful circulation of life. And so I give thanks that for each and every one of us who choose to, we can let the grace of God into the dark places of our soul. The places where we feel discontent and worried and fearful. And grace will deliver us an idea, a thought, an aha, an opportunity that will save us from this darkness. For unto us a child is born, and a child can represent an idea, a new beginning. Unto all of us, this light is born. For in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and that Word resides within us, and it was the light unto all of the world. And so I give thanks that we take this holy season, this beautiful darkness, and we let our roots go deep, and our soul rise up. And we allow the grace of the universe to give us what we need this year. And so it is.